Finally, Armageddon. Oh, wait. Harrison?
Where did you come from?
Harrison Keeley.
I've been here the whole time.
You have?
Yep.
Under the desk.
Yes, we have a special guest joining us today. Harrison Keeley of Mind Matters podcast, sister podcast for SOT.net. And we're going to be discussing with Harrison.
And Harrison has a Substack.
Oh, among other things. Yeah, update us. What's going on? You've got...
I've got a Substack.
or two.
Yeah.
Or one.
Yeah. I run one and I write one officially under my own name. So I do the ponerology Substack, so ponerology.substack.com, where I pretty much just talk about the book by Lobachevsky, Political Ponerology, and then related subjects, so psychopathy and psychopathy in politics, history, ideology, psychology, that kind of stuff. Then I edit the Cassiopeia Substack on weird stuff like aliens and paranormal
and whatnot.
Paranormal.
But we haven't done a Mind Matters in a while. We've got to get back to that. We've been on hiatus for several months, so we'll get back to that eventually. Yes.
You're doing a lot of interviews on that mostly, weren't you?
Yeah. We got into mostly doing interviews, and so I've got a few people I want to interview, and we'll get probably some old guests back on the show because we've interviewed a lot of really cool people, and it's been a while since we've talked to them. So looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. You're not just writing about Lobachevsky's book, hence the name Ponerology, because I've seen a couple of posts and it's bringing in current research and seeing where they fit, where they don't, where they jive.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to need updates. How many cycles? Who are they? Where are they? Well, I think that's kind of where people go, what their minds go, oh my God, yeah, the cycles in the world, they're everywhere. No, wait, who are they? We can identify them, but the gist of the whole, you've looked at this up one way and down the other, and it remains as elusive as ever.
Yeah.
Without knowing someone a long time, seeing their behavior and so on.
Yeah, like it's tricky in politics because just in everyday life, when you're interacting with someone, you can get an idea, especially if you get targeted, but then no one else will believe you. And in politics, it's trickier. It's even trickier because everyone in politics lies, right? Part of politics is that you have to create your kind of public political persona. And that's what psychopaths do. So when you're looking at any given politician, are they just like a relatively ordinary person who's just greedy and wants to be in power? Because that's a lot of people. Or are they actually like a stone cold predator? Yeah. And it's hard to know. Like you can get an idea with some of them, especially if there's like scandal upon scandal. Like there was that one guy. Oh, I can't remember. He went to prison for a while. He was I think he was a Democrat. He was
the Chicago guy.
Yeah.
Blagojevich.
Yeah, Blagojevich.
Yeah.
And
Chicago Mafia,
Yeah, so back in the day before he got arrested, there were all kinds of stories, and unless all of them were fake, he just sounded like the typical profile. But he's back now and, getting interviewed by Tucker Carlson.
Right.
And he's now Republican because the Democrats have gone crazy. But if you read the old stories about him, that's kind of the profile. So but is he? So it's a hall of mirrors when you get into politics, because unless you know the people, unless you know their staffers and the people that grew up with them and can interview everyone, it's tough. What you can do is just kind of see the effects, the large scale effects that kind of trickle down from, so you can see there must be something going on, but unless you get someone in there to actually do investigations on every individual, it's going to be hard to know for the most part, one way or another for any given guy.
And you really only see the effects years later.
Yeah.
For example, not saying he is, we don't know, like I said, but Obama, 8 years of it. Everyone was hoping change at the beginning. And it's not even that by the end they were so sick of him, they had to go, although that was obviously a factor in why Trump was elected. But it's only with more time passing and the contrast between Trump's actions and Obama's actions, that you go, there's something really off with this guy, and then all the stuff starts coming out about his wife, and people are like, there's something not right there. They know something's wrong with the guy, but nailing it down, I've taken the thing that in politics, you're right, they shape a persona, but actual real cycles, they're probably weeded out for the most part, even now. Your psychotypes are going to be more likely found in the topics we're often talking about: deep state politics, permanent bureaucrats who never really come on the radar, or rarely do.
Yeah.
They just quietly do their thing in the background in some small office in DC or New York or whatever.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that a lot of like the covert operations types are psychopaths,
Right, for sure.
And I got in a conversation years ago with a psychopathy researcher, like an academic, and she was like, "Oh, there's no way that the CIA would hire psychopaths because they do all these kind of like psychological testing, right?"
Right.
And there's a perspective where I can see that making sense, like because I think a lot of the institutions, like at the federal, like executive level, they do have pretty good screening processes,
background checks.
Yeah, and background checks. But I've also read a whole bunch of stories of guys that get into the CIA where they say, no, they actually look for these certain qualities in certain people to do certain tasks, right?
Exactly.
So it'll depend on the position, because I think that I think a lot of the time, like
it doesn't make any sense. I mean, for those kind of black ops and intel type operations, you can't do the standard, background check and run with that. You can't just go, okay, well, he was involved in petty crime, and or he might have been involved in more serious crime or kind of fraud or this. I mean, a lot of those things might actually be the thing you're looking for in the potential candidate. So the idea that it's just like straight up, oh, you broke the rules, so you can't have a job here is nonsense. It's like, you broke the rules, so how good are you at breaking the rules? And can you break the rules in places we want you to break the rules?
Yeah.
I've got an example of that. I can't remember his name, but he's an ex-CIA guy. Robert Kennedy Jr. He's got a blurb on his book. It just came out in the last year. I can't remember his name, but I saw an interview with him, and he was talking about how he got in the CIA and how he was originally in a different field. He knew a friend. He had a friend that was in the CIA he didn't know at the time, and he just wanted to switch careers, so the guy kind of pushed him into it. And he said that in his first interview, he went in being like, oh man, I've got all kinds of stuff in my past, like, alcohol, drugs, all this stuff. And they do polygraphs and everything. So he goes in and he said he's kind of nervous, and he goes in and he just decided to he either decided or he was told, just tell the truth. So he went in and he just said, so they asked, okay, what about your history? And he just laid it all out there. He's like, and the guy interviewing, or the chick interviewing him was like, okay. Yeah, we'll call you back. And like 3 months later, he comes back and he's like, so that didn't really matter? He's like, no, we're good. So, all the stuff he thought would be disqualifying, they were probably looking at that and saying, okay, yeah, all right.
We've got a position open for you, yeah.
And he went into covert ops, so he was like, he was in foreign countries, like getting agents, and I think even, I can't remember if he actually ran operations himself or if he was just, recruiter.
Yeah. I think the most important thing they're looking for in people like that is not some kind of high moral standing, but rather, in fact, quite often the opposite. That they're willing to do anything, everything, and anything, but also intelligence. Obviously, you don't want a stupid criminal; you want a smart criminal. So that's what this, that's the CIA's logo. Really, the CIA's motto should be: "We hire smart criminals."
We lie, cheat, and steal smartly.
Yeah.
Well, of course, there's the whole history with informants as well. I mean, that's where the suit, who you assume is a good, regular American civilian, clean, good old American boy, he's having to do the dirty work by hiring a dirty informant. But then you realize they're surrounded by informants, and their behaviors, you can't really tell them apart. I mean, there's some characters down through history. It's not even a recent thing.
Well, it also ties into what I've been writing about recently on my Substack on this Australian woman. She got her PhD writing a thesis on what she calls a persistent predatory personality. Right. And her main idea is that all of the existing tests for psychopathy essentially test for criminal psychopathy. And there's there's this kind of blurry area that hasn't been studied of the high functioning psychopath, right? That doesn't get caught. That's not a criminal, and it can be a doctor, a lawyer, in law enforcement, in politics, and so it could even be possible that that the people doing the hiring aren't necessary, that they could innocently hire these types of people. Like they might actually be trying to screen out criminal psychopaths because they're unreliable, but they either know what they want and they get it, or they get fooled because no one even knows that these kind of people exist. So,
Yeah.
What's the name of that author?
Karen Mitchell, Dr. Karen Mitchell.
And
sorry.
is her, I read it, but I'm trying to remember the gist of it. Her idea of persistent psychopathy was it something like, let's get away from trying to ID and categorize and just have a general map?
Kind of. Like, let's get away from the current standards in how we test for it, which is a very academic, like checklist kind of thing. Her idea is more, here are the traits in language that everyone can understand, and here are the kinds of things that these people do.
Do you find it useful?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought it was really clear. In a piece I did a couple of weeks ago, I compared her list of attributes with the PCLR, which is like the
classical diagnostic.
Yeah, and there's overlap, right? And she tries to use words that, like, a lot of the phrases and like descriptions even in the PCLR, like most people wouldn't understand what they mean just by looking at them.
Yeah.
So she just uses kind of basic language to describe the traits, and like half of the traits pretty much overlap with the PCLR, but the other half like aren't even mentioned,
right.
and those ones plus the things like high intelligence and high like self-control and not doing petty crime, like those are all diagnostic in the PCLR, but they're not included in her model because there's a spectrum basically of low functioning to high functioning.
This is great. This is what people need, a less arcane, esoteric, academic descriptions or checklists if needed, because and that's kind of what you're doing. You're kind of deciphering Lobachevsky, who is extremely dense for a modern audience, and it's having effect. I mean, I don't know if it's a direct effect, but it is interesting when there's some political hot topic, and I see a lot of people on social media. Obviously, this isn't a lot of people like most people, but it's people paying attention, and they're like, psycho.
Yeah.
They're watching someone's response. They're discussing not just the issue, but a pattern of behavior, and they're coming to their own, psycho. They may not be sure what a psychopath is, but they're like, so it's helpful, I think.
Yeah. Well, like, we've been talking about this for like 20 years.
I know.
Right? And back in the day, so 20 years ago, if you were to make a comment, about like politicians being psychopaths, some people would probably be like, well, what are you talking about? Now I've noticed that if I make a tweet or something or a comment on my Substack, the responses I'll get are like, well, yeah, that's obvious.
Yeah,
why are you stating the obvious? Like, we already know that.
Yeah.
I know. If they only knew how lonely it was for so long. But now a lot of people know. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's progress, but it may be too late because, as we discuss on our show every week, the psychos will run amok. That's probably where we'll start with. As usually happens, late last Sunday, right after our last show, the US did something else, the next step in the Ukraine war, by greenlighting the use of long-range missiles by Ukraine into Russia proper. Over the next 2 days, there were 2 series of barrages with ATACMS into Russia.
ATACMS.
ATACMS.
Come on, you get it right. It's very important. ATACMS. That's why they use that acronym. So you could pronounce it as ATACM.
Really?
Like
it didn't
attack-
help my brain. I just look at it and go, that's not a word.
It is. It says attack them. Attack them. Attack them,
ATACM.
ATAC. Attack them. ATACM. Yeah, attack them. Attack 'em.
I don't speak Americanese.
You don't speak NATO, obviously, is your problem.
No, all these military acronyms.
What'll we do about them Russians? Let's attack them.
Let's attack them.
You see? Jeez.
It's so clever.
Somebody went to a lot of effort to come up with that acronym, and you didn't even get it. Like,
No.
I mean, it's so disrespectful.
I
Anyway.
didn't get it.
You didn't get it either?
No.
Ah, come on, guys.
Attack 'em. Go get him.
It adds more power to the weapons when you call them that as well.
Well, on the naming of weapons, so then Vlad gets on TV and says, in his concluding remark, super stern, there will always be a response. And then boom, Russian super duper ICBM type weapon is launched in Ukraine, and people see the video. And what do they call it? It's in the English translation of their new super duper weapon is hazel.
No, hazelnut.
Is it?
Yes.
It's not even the flower, it's a nut.
Hazelnut.
You compare that so different to the Angloids who were like, Storm Shadow,
Attack 'em.
attack 'em. Storm Saxons on your ass.
We kill you.
The Russians are like cherubs and
We kill you with hazelnuts.
dahlias and hazelnuts.
But that's just a mask there. Yeah, but the actual chronology of it was, you kind of skipped a bit of the chronology. It was Biden announcing that they're going to be allowed, Biden, quote unquote, announcing that Ukraine was going to be allowed to use about this long debated use of long range precision Western weapons into Russia proper. And it was 2 days, I think maybe 2 days, maybe not even 2 days after that then we got the first reports that they were actually used.
Wasn't
So they were
there
pretty quick?
Wasn't there
on
a precision, a qualifier within that? Initially, just into Kursk, because Kursk is Russia proper, but it's held by
Right.
Ukraine. Therefore, it's part of
50
the
kilometers.
legitimate battlefield. And what happens? They fire over.
130 kilometers, yeah. So they went into Bryansk, yeah, and hit maybe an airfield, but I mean, well, not even. The Russians claim, I think they fired 5, and Russians claim they pretty much shot,
All of them.
well,
But
destroyed
one
4
fell.
of them, and the last one actually was hit but fell and caused some damage, but nothing serious. And then a couple of days later, you had Russia firing its hazelnuts.
We
Threw
got
some
it.
hazelnuts over the border. But the interesting thing is that
I have to watch it
I
again.
mean, there's nuances to this, like, because attackings have been used in Ukraine before, and actually, I think Zelensky got all whiny after Russia responded by saying, what's the big deal? Why they should? This is a terrible war crime by the Russians firing their hazelnuts at us, and justified by the fact that that we used attackings. But we've used attackings before, and they fired those missiles in Ukraine into Crimea.
Donetsk City.
Yeah, and Crimea before, you know what I mean? But I think the nuance here is that it was obviously read from a diplomatic perspective. This was a shift. This was an escalation by NATO where they were giving official approval to Ukraine to fire these weapons at Russia, and who knows how far. So, the fact they'd used them before in Ukraine against Russian troops, and even in Crimea. Crimea was still, they get a pass on Crimea because which fair dues to the Russians, like they're saying, okay, they sucked up a lot of Western weapons, including cruise missiles. What was the one that
HIMARS.
No, the one they used for the boat
Neptune.
and stuff like that. Cruise missiles that sunk Russian ships in Crimea.
The flagship of the Black Sea
the
Fleet.
Moskva, and they didn't respond in the way they have to this more recent one. So, but I think fair dues, they said that Crimea technically, okay, we took that in 2014. It's kind of part of the battlefield, as is all of Ukraine. So we're going to allow or suck up the fact that they'll use Western weapons against us in Ukraine, but not into Kursk. And we'll even suck up, not see as an escalation, suck up their incursion, their physical incursion into Kursk, like occupying and taking. You'd have thought that them actually taking part of Russia proper, invading it, obviously with Western backing and all that kind of stuff, that would have been a bigger escalation
Than this, which
than
is...
firing a few.
This is more like a formality, whereas
Longer
that was a 20,000 invading force.
Yeah.
with Americans and Brits,
But
some among them.
But apparently, from the Russian perspective, there was something else behind the scenes that signaled this was different. That there was something
Maybe-
that this was an escalation. That they were taking the gloves off. That they were officially allowing Ukraine, quote unquote, i.e., themselves, allowing NATO to fire without any Ukrainian involvement at all, really. Other than
Yes.
just using Ukrainian
Which
territory.
Putin said explicitly in his address.
Yeah.
Look, they're staffed
Yeah.
by NATO officers. So NATO officers just fired NATO weapons at,
Yeah.
look, that's
There's a kind
too
of,
much.
Yeah, it's a subtle shift in the whole dynamic, and it clearly is an escalation by NATO to do that. So, and I suppose what's egregious about it for the Russians is that all along the Russians have said that the whole point of the SMO in Ukraine is because all these years NATO has been moving closer and closer and putting its, incorporating Russia's countries on Russia's borders into NATO, and then putting weapons on those borders. So they didn't want basically NATO weapons, which Russia sees as an aggressive anti-Russian alliance. They don't want them right on their border, and that's been the bone of contention all along. And that was to a large extent the cause of the Ukrainian, the special military operation, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So, with the advent of this idea of high-grade kind of precision long-range weapons being fired from the border of Ukraine with Russia into Russia, that was effectively them
saying this is the very reason we're no.
up yours. We're basically doing what you complained about all these years. We're gonna do it, because that's just one step as well. It's just the initial step. If Russia backs down and says nothing or does not respond to these longer range missiles, NATO missiles being fired from Ukraine into Russia, well then, if what's the next step then? Is there the possibility of a ballistic missile, intermediate ballistic missile, or whatever, some kind of larger NATO Western weapon being fired at Russia? It's camel in the Arab type thing.
Yeah.
Take a little bit. It's like it's super psycho. Like it's kind of like I was using that analogy. It was the other day. It was like, for some reason, like, can you see that pen? No. Anyway, if I was saying there's a pen here in front of me, and saying Neil really doesn't like pens, and I was gonna and I said, Neil goes, don't move that pen any closer to me. I really don't like pens. And I just go, okay, I won't do that. I just go, I know, tiny little centimeters going like that. What? Come on, it was, Neil, it's hard. It's no different from what it was before. Come on, look. Anyway, so what I was saying was, and then you freak out a bit more, and then I go a bit more, and then a bit more. And it's like, it's psycho torture, and it's you can see in another environment the mentality behind that
Cat and mouse.
Yeah, is or not even cat and mouse, but it's just a kind of gaslight. Well, there's a lot of gaslighting going on, and lying, provocation, but subtle in a way where it's like not obvious. Like they're trying to cloak their provocation in, or just hide it altogether, so that when you respond, it's kind of ultimately it really is gaslighting.
That's what psychopaths do.
Right. It's literally when you the person says don't do this or don't do something or stop doing that, I don't like it, and then you do it, and then you say you didn't do it, and then in fact your reaction is the aggressive thing to do, and that I didn't provoke you at all, that you're provoking me now by responding to something that I didn't even do, even though it's obvious that I did do it.
Yeah.
The kind of forbearance
they,
Russians need to do that kind of bullshit. It's just they've been dealing with it for like decades,
It's a long game of whatever happens, they started this. So when the missiles fly for real or something, the West cannot be the aggressor. It is always the moral arbiter,
of virtue. Yeah.
Can we watch the videos?
Yeah, go on ahead.
Go on. I've given you 2 links there. So this is the arrival of these hazelnuts. In
delicious hazelnuts.
Well, look, there's an interesting comment there. Read that top comment. Named hazelnut because the smoke trail in the air just before impact looks like the, I can't see that, catkin? Flowering spike of the hazelnut tree. So it looks like a flying hazelnut flowering?
Right.
Maybe.
It's still a flower.
The Russians themselves say that.
It's still not attackums, man. It's still not attackums.
Well, then there's the names that the Americans or NATO give to all the Russian bombs, right?
Right.
They're always worse than the Russian translation.
Yeah, like Satan.
Yeah, like is Satan? I can't remember if that's just the American designation or if it's
I think it's the American one. And there's a
Russian
Sarmat or something.
Yeah.
And the hit was in central Ukraine at at the Yushmash Ukrainian weapons company. Maybe they have a facility here. So anyway, this let it play a couple of times. Look, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's it. And play one more time from this angle. Oh, you got to reload. Okay.
There's 6 of those in that bunch, I think.
4, 5, 6.
So there were 6 missiles fired, and each of them had six.
Well, yeah, this is closer.
Multiple warheads.
And this is closer, and you can see impacts on the ground. This is what I want to ask you about. Russian classical music, of course. You see how far apart the arrivals are. 3, 4, 5. That was 6. There's a split in the atmosphere, and they come down as 6.
Yeah.
But is there then a subsequent split of each of the 6?
No.
Well, look,
those 6
spread out
That's those 6,
over an area.
Yeah. 6 missiles with 6 warheads in each cone.
Okay.
So 6 times 6 is 36.
Okay, right, gotcha. So
Anyway.
there is a second split.
Hmm?
That's what I was wondering.
No, there's 6 missiles.
Yeah. And then each of those cones. 6 missiles. But wasn't it one ICBM that split to 6 first?
Maybe.
And then it split 6 again.
I don't know how many they fired, to be honest.
We don't know. Okay.
But look at this. There's a good actual on this Telegraph video. If you watch the top there, if that's going to actually play. Close that.
Well, at least the Telegraph got the headline right.
It's the same. Well, there's a. For some reason, it isn't.
This is the different CCTV.
It's just another.
Yes.
You see that? You can see them more distinctly there. You can see it on the lot. See that one?
Yes.
And that one. You can see them very clearly.
They're separated.
There. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Ah.
All quite close. The interesting thing about that image is that that videos like that generally don't or missiles like that. I mean, you can see that along the whole length of it, it's lit up like a Christmas tree. You know what I mean?
Like
generally
a tracer fire or something.
Yeah, you generally don't see that. You know. Now, I don't think they're that long.
Right.
So that is a kind of trail. But it suggests, I mean, a lot of people have been talking in recently, been talking about plasma and stuff like that. And apparently above Mach 10, you will get plasma being produced just because of the heating of the air and the ionization, whatever, of the air around the actual body of the projectile. It'll produce a plasma effect. You know, there's someone else on SAT, some guy on SAT, in response to an article I wrote about it, they said that he suggested one way would be to envelope the vehicle, i.e. the warhead or whatever the missile, with a high energy plasma discharge that basically keeps the atmosphere from touching the vehicle's surface. So that way you can achieve hypersonic speeds. This is basically how you actually achieve hypersonic speeds, is by producing plasma kind of on the fly or as part of the actual or rather than allowing it to achieve, you know, conventionally achieving high rate of speed, more than Mach 10, and then plasma being created as a result of the speed. You actually create plasma somehow. Now the interesting thing, if you go back to that article, there's a bit in it Russian word for hazelnut tree. Okay, Oreshnik. Hazelnut tree for the first time in combat on Thursday. I recommend the ruling elites of these countries that are hatching plans to use their military contingents against Russia seriously think about this, blah, blah. So secret was the development of this missile that little is known about it until footage emerged of its first strike.
Correction, 0 was known about it.
Yeah.
Was this one of the ones that I think it was a few years ago Putin announced?
No, it wasn't.
No?
He didn't. This is what I mean. They had 0 knowledge of this.
Yeah, if you go on down there a little bit, so it says, interesting things, experts described it, right there, experts described it as an experimental hybrid missile that sits in a category between intercontinental and intermediate range missiles. This means that it's a range of, whatever. But the use of who these experts are, I don't know, but experimental hybrid, and then they say sits in a category between intercontinental and intermediate range missiles. That's the words experimental hybrid are that's too many words and the wrong words if all you're referring to there is that it sits between intercontinental and intermediate range missiles. That's just distance, and that would just be a function of the amount of fuel in a conventional missile. So it's not, you wouldn't say experimental hybrid. It suggests that that someone in Washington or in NATO, in America, and the Brits, etc., looked at this and realized that there was something unusual about it, and maybe they knew about, maybe they had some intel on it before, but of course they're not saying. But yeah, it's just very interesting. And also the other thing is that you mentioned that there wasn't any there was very little strikes. You can see in one of those videos we just watched, there was very little impact on the ground, which suggests that it had very little actual warhead, explosive, or maybe even none at all, because flying at 12,000, 13,000, whatever it is, kilometers per hour, any projectile of any object of a reasonable size is going to be carrying a lot of kinetic energy. So it would, it's going to create a crater at the very least of some size, depending on the size of the actual object flying at that speed. So it's possible that it didn't have any. It had very little explosive warhead or none at all, and therefore the point of this was, as everybody should understand now, this was a demonstration for NATO. The fact they fired at Russia, at Ukraine, at an industrial facility in Ukraine, is beside the point. They could have picked anywhere.
Well,
they just picked some place, but the point was that it was a demonstration of this technology, basically, and make them sit back and go, okay.
Did you read about the facility, though, about its history? I saw there was this journalist on X, and she had toured that facility, like, I don't know how many years ago, and wrote about it in her book. I think it was a female. And so she made this, she did a thread quoting from her book on the history of it, and the gist of it is that facility used to be the Soviet Union's premier ICBM production facility.
Right.
So
another message, within a message.
Yeah. Why not? Yeah.
This isn't the USSR anymore. We have something else.
Again, that just speaks to it being a symbolic strike or a demonstration for NATO. And the point being, we're firing these at Ukraine today. Here's what we can do. And it has nothing to do with us firing these at Ukraine. We can use these against you, and we will use them against you. That's the whole point. The point is we'll use these against you.
And you're using the old USSR playbook, Cold War playbook.
Right.
This is a new phase. And Putin said as much as his message. So at least that he said something that was like, wow. If we use these, something like, don't worry, we're going to give fair warning because we know you can't stop them anyway. So, i.e., if you're living in the area, because he talked about Western elites again, it was trying to say something like, our war isn't against Western people. He mentioned Western elites and said, if there is something, we know you can't stop us, so there'll be warning issued. Like a day's worth, you can just evacuate any base, or
they did warn Russia, but not in a personal capacity. Peskov said that there's
they warned the U.S. government.
There's a kind of, based on the nuclear treaty or whatever. Well, if they have a treaty anyway, but basically the communication they have for avoiding
it's a nuclear risk reduction line.
Risk reduction, exactly. That it's almost automatic, or it's automated or something, but anyway, it wasn't a personal message, hey guys, we're going to do this and here's what it is. It was more like, listen, we're firing missiles, don't mistake them for a nuclear strike, because they're not.
Right.
End of story. End of message. But But yeah, so and the Pentagon had a Pentagon spokesperson, that Indian kind of girl, on the day said that Ukraine, that this was kind of dismissed it. So officially they kind of dismissed this as anything significant, and that Ukraine, this is just more of the same from the evil Russian dictator. And Ukraine has said specifically, Ukraine has withstood attacks by Russia with significantly larger warheads now, which is true. But the point being, are you that stupid? The point being that it wasn't to create a giant explosion in Ukraine. That's what America interprets. They're all about shock and awe, right?
Yeah.
It's like to impress the world with their awesome explosive power, right? So they'll like fire 500 cruise missiles out of Iraq in one night and that kind of stuff.
And only 25% of them are accurate.
Well, and blow the crap out of everything, right? And then everybody is meant to be scared, whereas Russia's a bit more subtle. But the Americans don't understand that, because if it's not like a massive big boom, then they're not gonna. They don't appreciate that. They don't value that. And she said, look, they've used like, bigger, and they have used bigger. They used glide bombs, 1,500, 1.5 ton, 3 ton bombs in Ukraine for quite some time. But she wasn't able, at least officially anyway. Maybe she's just bullshitting for the public. But I would say the people behind the scenes in the Pentagon obviously took note of the actual message. I hope they did.
Yeah.
But officially, it's like, this is no big deal. Look, there was hardly any explosions. Who cares that they were traveling at like freaking 15,000 kilometers an hour, and there's no way we can shoot them down, and they could land one pretty much in any European capital or anytime they want. That's insignificant. It's irrelevant.
Subsequent to this, we've seen our local media is telling people not to worry. Putin's bluffing, although they do say that in the context of Putin launching a nuke on the Ukraine / the West. But yes, he's just bluffing message is still going strong. And diplomatically, we've had the UK and now France saying, yeah, we give approval for our scalp missiles to be used by Ukraine into Russia. Mm-hmm. So diplomatically, I'm just seeing business as usual. Do you think we're probably going to go to the next? Russia's going to have to. I don't think NATO's going to take heed. But there's been no brake pulled on it. There's been no retraction of actually no more green light for Ukraine to use ATACMS. So, and there's since been another strike.
Yeah, I just saw the headline that, or it might have just been a tweet that they launched more into Kursk just today or last night.
Yeah, well, I don't know. You'd like to be able to get into the heads of these people, but probably not. Actually, when you think about it, you wouldn't want to be in there at all. But at the same time, it seems important to try and understand exactly what their thinking is, and are they that stupid? Are they actually as stupid as they seem to be? Or what's their plan? What's their game plan? Do they think Russia won't do it?
You wrote a piece between Biden's green light and Russia sending this message. Can you put it up? High precision, long range NATO missiles against Russia. Why now? And you're making the case that if there is some sense, some consistency or rationale to the why of it, it isn't to make Russia go ballistic, although that has actually kind of happened. It's part of an. Well, you tell us. It's a real politic anticipation of what's likely to come with the Trump administration negotiations over Ukraine.
Yeah, I think they're pretty. I mean, they're probably taking Trump at his word. They think he's a loose cannon and all that kind of stuff, and they'll try and stop him. But they can't be sure that he won't do what he claims he plans to do very quickly after January 20th, whenever he takes office. That he'll make a phone call and bring it to an end, have a settlement, or bring the war to an end in 24 hours. Be done, over. Now it might take a bit longer than that, but they're probably taking it seriously that he wants to do that. And the first thing to do obviously would be to, in theory, cut off funding or drastically reduce any funding to Ukraine, stop supplying weapons to Ukraine. And Zelensky's talked about that. Everybody knows that if that happened, that would be the end of it. Basically, they wouldn't be able to function really for very much longer. So. The deep state or Washington types, or the establishment, let's say, are probably taking that at least seriously to an extent that could happen. And if they aren't able to stop Trump doing that, then how can they, frame things in advance of that? i.e. they've got a few months, let's say. How can they frame things in the next 3 months to
deliver maximum returns?
Yeah, to at least make it make any peace negotiations with Russia more favourable to the West.
Yeah.
We want to hold on to as much of Ukraine as possible and to deliver a strategic defeat to Russia, or the appearance of one.
Yeah.
So what can they do? So one way they could do that would be to well, the only thing they have really in their toolkit is to escalate and see how far they can push Russia. See how, test Russia's patience and see if they can call Russia's bluff. See if Russia's bluffing. How far can they push it? How far can they push that pin? So one way to do that would be to try and make it force Russia to accept the reality of Ukraine, quote unquote Ukraine, i.e. NATO troops using these kind of longer range weapons into Russia, a little bit further into Russia. And if we do that enough, and that becomes an accepted part of the theatre of war type thing, or the acceptable use of weaponry, then at a negotiating table, it's like, okay, that's what's
on the ground.
That's what we have to our advantage. That's what NATO has to its advantage. That if Russia doesn't, agree to terms that are acceptable to us, then we go back to the state of play before negotiations. If negotiations break down, well, then you go back to what you're doing before. But you want to have been doing certain things before to go back to those, if you know what I mean. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You want to have it already established as
A fait accompli.
Fait accompli. Russia has apparently accepted the fact that, we could periodically we can use these longer range precision weapons, and, we won't use them very far into Russia, but the threat is there that we could use them for that. Behind it all is just, and Russia understood that. Behind all of this strategizing by the West and NATO is the idea, like I keep saying, or that everybody keeps saying, is that in the Western media anyway, that Russia's bluffing.
Yeah.
And that they won't do anything crazy. They won't.
And yet,
they won't escalate the war outside.
We're all supposed to believe he's nuts. He's crazy.
Yeah,
it's a bizarre contradiction where Putin's crazy, but he's also sane.
Yeah.
And self-interested.
Well, that's just propaganda. But so that they won't escalate outside Ukraine, and that they'll have to suck it up. Ultimately, they'll have to suck up anything we try to do, or any way we escalate it. Russia will ultimately have to accept it, because
they have thus far.
They have thus far, and crossing that red line of escalating outside of Ukraine would be really bad press for Russia. Now they're
potentially
betting.
MAD.
Yes, well, yes, potentially. They're betting on it's a game of, I don't know, it's a game of chicken, or it's game theory. Probably a lot of game theory being used. So they're betting on Russia not doing that, not wanting to do that, not wanting to go down in history as the leader. But Putin don't want to go down in history as the leader who actually initiated a third world war, like a war in continental Europe. Where you basically have
just for Ukraine.
Yeah, NATO countries fighting. Yeah, fighting directly with Russia, or Russia invading European countries, as they've long claimed is going to happen, or there being a hot war. Direct contact between Russian troops and NATO troops, that Putin won't want to go there, because there's all sorts of considerations. He ultimately, as much as he doesn't like Europe these days and all this kind of stuff, Russia ultimately sees Europe as a very valuable trading partner, and down the line, relationships will be healed and all that kind of stuff. Once you can get America out of the way, European countries will become friends again with Russia. So he doesn't want to sour.
Yeah.
Because,
and Washington
look at the
knows
relationships in Europe after the First and Second World War. You know what I mean? Like where
Yes.
European countries really went to war with each other. I mean, they were pretty okay at, trade ultimately reestablished itself, but there were a lot of repercussions for quite a long time.
Well, there was a Cold War. Hardly any interaction between East and West.
Yeah, but even
decades.
within Europe, I mean,
Yeah.
between European countries, you know what I mean? It took quite a long time for those to reestablish, and you don't necessarily want to cross that line. And that's what they're betting on, They're saying you don't want to go there. And,
Yeah.
And Putin, and I think the Russians understood all of that. That's the game they're playing. They're betting that we won't go there. And Russia said, well, that seems to put us in a position, they're kind of right that we don't want to go there. And it would have, the threshold is quite high for us to actually to go there. They would have to do a lot for us to actually go there. But and
Politically, we could
that's-
lose trade with Germany for 2 decades.
Yeah, and that seems to leave Russia in a position where it has no room for maneuver. It just has to suck up
Yeah.
the creeping escalation of this conflict, and but then Russia decides, well, no, that doesn't leave us with no room for maneuver.
Right.
We can give a demonstration. So it's threats.
Yes.
There's the threat of us NATO attacking further into Russia with their weapons, and then Russia responds by threatening that we can use these weapons theoretically against your capitals. Here's what they can do. Here's a live demonstration. What do you think now? And then the Europeans sit back and go, let's have a think about that. What should we do about that?
What should we
They say,
do?
well,
2 days later, Macron,
they're bluffing.
send more missiles.
Yeah. they fall back on, they're bluffing, because they fall back on this belief that Russia will
They'll
not
never
cross
do
that line.
Yeah.
And, nobody wants that line to be crossed, obviously.
But there's something else. I don't know how much it would factor into Putin's strategic thinking. But I'm looking at British accounts on social media. And I mean, the sarcasm's off the charts. They're like, oh, Putin's got a new weapon. Yeah, could you bomb London,
Yeah.
Birmingham, Manchester?
Yeah.
If you're going to do it, I mean, just in that order, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Europeans are like, there's another bet here, which is that Putin could
Free Europe.
realistically do a series of strategic strikes, not directly hit capitals,
Well, the term
warn
is-
civilians beforehand,
the term is-
and watch NATO-backed governments collapse because the popular support is there is none.
The term is decapitation.
Right. Regime change.
Regime decapitation. We're going to. That's a NATO term, or the US term that they've used during their whole lifetime. So you could decapitate, Starmer, and that's not literally, obviously, just for YouTube and the censors. I don't mean that.
No, you
Starmer
don't
should-
even need to,
It's
'cause
a NATO term of decapitation of a regime, where you basically take out the regime leadership
I don't
by
think-
strategic strikes. And that's what the British people would like to see happen. A lot of British people would like to see happen.
Well, they're wishfully thinking, because I don't think Russia hasn't even done that to the Kiev regime,
Yeah, exactly.
even though they've shown off drone
Yeah.
footage showing that they know where Zelensky's convoy is at any moment.
Do you think
that's
that-
not their thing? It's more like actually hit back at NATO military interests, be it weapons factories
Yeah.
or bases.
Yeah.
And that alone, Europe is it seems so locked down, but actually politically it's so fragile that could cause a government to fall politically
Yeah.
back over here in the capital. You don't need to actually
Yeah.
target the regime.
No, of course, yeah, and they probably wouldn't. There's plenty of NATO bases in European countries within reach of Russia's missiles that would be seen as legitimate targets if these are if NATO is firing effectively all on their own, using Ukrainian territory to fire long-range precision weapons at Russian military bases, which they have done just recently, then a totally valid response is for Russia to target the counterparts of those in European countries.
That's what Putin's
So, like, you
clearly
have
saying.
a big NATO base, and you have a missile defense base in Poland that was opened about 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, the Aegis.
Aegis Ashore missile defense base, and so that could be just taken out. And that's like, there's not many people. There's no Polish people living on that base. They're all NATO personnel. Maybe there are some there are Poles there, obviously, but they're all military personnel. And if they're in Russia, if they're in Ukraine, if there's Poles working under the aegis of NATO in Ukraine, operating long-range precision NATO weapons, firing them at Russia,
Fair game. It's fair game.
a totally fair game. And like, what would the Polish people do? How would that make it any different? It would be shocking to people. Like, oh my God, Putin just fired a missile. Like, it's ridiculous.
It shouldn't be.
Literally, Russia has been firing, like, Kinzhal and other long-range precision weapons at effectively NATO bases in Ukraine, right beside the border of Poland.
Yeah.
All they would have to do would just adjust the targeting about 30 kilometres, and they would hit exactly the same place, more or less, in Poland. But if that happened, it's like, oh my God. But it's like, dude, it's 30 kilometres different. What, you didn't shit your pants the last time. Why are you shitting your pants just because there's a line on a border and the missile went over the border? I mean, so there's a reality of it that is so shrouded in propaganda and
that's the bluff Putin could call. The whole NATO Article 5.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
If you call that bluff.
But on that, if you go back to that the SOT article there, I just drew that map at the top as an example. We were just talking about why they're escalating this point in advance of a possible peace agreement under Trump in the next few months. And I just, like, those are the 4 regions, and that's them along their original. Russia doesn't actually hold up. It holds most of Luhansk, about 70% of Donetsk, pretty much all of Kherson, I think, and most of Zaporizhia. But so they hold most of those regions, but not all of them, and that's what they're still, where the front line really is still, and Russia's still fighting to take all of those 4 regions, which are already incorporated into the Russian Federation. But in some kind of peace settlement, you'd have, obviously, they're not even up for negotiation. Russia's keeping those, and Crimea, obviously. But along with that, I was thinking Russia would need some kind of a buffer zone, like a demilitarized zone.
Yeah, DMZ.
Where it would be completely neutral and very likely, like, would to all intents and purposes be incorporated into those 4 regions as well in a certain sense, or be part of them, be fully aligned with Russia, but called a buffer zone between those, out from those 4 regions, and then obviously along the northern border of Belarus and northern border of Russia as well. You need a buffer zone, and that would leave something like, I just drew a rough outline of what it might look like, and you're left with, and that, maybe that isn't even all of it. It could be further than that, but you're left with this kind of rump Ukraine, which is, maybe 50% of the original territory, or a bit less.
Which can be NATO all at once and EU all at once.
Yeah,
but
except
Russia be like,
I saw
Say
someone else. Why is that not working?
well, there are funny maps where the buffer zone goes out to Germany. But that's
Computer just.
that's a few years away.
Yeah, check out this. So I saw this. Is that actually working? So this is according to Interfax Ukraine, citing intelligence sources. This is from Ukraine. This is what the Ukrainians is talking about, possible if there was a peace settlement and how that would play out. Russia's longer-term settlement plan involves 3 new regions of Russia, which would include, if you just scroll down a little bit so you can see the map, the formal annexation of Donetsk, Luhansk, that's already done, would be part of any deal, and incorporating them into the Russian Federation, that's done. A pro-Russian state formation encompassing the central regions of Ukraine and Kiev. It is implied that these areas would have pro-Russian governance and host Russian military bases. And then disputed territories, that's the yellow on the far left, these regions of Western Ukraine. The Kremlin reportedly plans to negotiate the future of these territories with Hungary, Poland and Romania.
Yeah.
So that, that's the Ukrainians think that Russia's going to take pretty much going to take, and it'll be fully Russia aligned with Russian military bases, 75% of Ukraine, and leaving this little dog's ear on the left that would just be called disputed territories, and and no mention of America, obviously, right? So Russia will talk with Romania, Poland, and Hungary about how to divvy those up in terms of, who control areas, which country would have control over which areas, and you'd be required to provide security for those particular areas. And yeah, sorry, who? America? No. There's no American. I don't see any American in this. No,
they didn't factor into our plans,
we didn't include them. I don't know why. It just didn't come up, really, to be honest. It just didn't.
Well, if there's any truth, I mean, that makes the whole Trump brokered peace deal like a joke on the face of it. Would Putin would only probably countenance that in the context of something much more serious, i.e. a major American downsizing from Central and Western Europe.
Well, that's a wish list, that kind of thing. Well,
wish list.
And it also says, a future further down the line, the ultimate manifestation of
post NATO. Should it go there?
Yeah, if in Ukraine, yeah. So yeah, very interesting.
Super. Yeah, it's good. It's finally been demonstrated by Russia. I mean, we're not surprised. We're like, oh yeah, there they are, because we pay attention. In 2018, Putin said, So we've got these awesome weapons. You have no analog. You have no way to counteract them. Like, did you all think he was bluffing? I didn't. He was pretty confident.
The problem is that they're not, like we've said this many times, the West is experiencing, I mean, and by West I mean the Western governments and the establishment in the West, primarily America, is, they're faced with an existential crisis of
NATO
being unseated from their global position of hot top dog, right? And all of the implications that come with that of downgrading of American power and influence in the world, and economic power and influence in the world, and at home, possibly very drastically. So they're fighting for their lives. Now, if your life has been, you can maybe think that you can have some sympathy for someone who's, quote unquote, fighting for their lives. But if you take a close look at their life and realize that they've basically been a mafia boss their whole life, and that they've gone around blackmailing, intimidating, killing, and
regime changing,
generally regime changing and overthrowing, and dominating the world with an iron fist for so long, well then, is that a life that's worth saving, or should anybody feel sympathy for that? But they obviously feel sympathy for themselves in that respect, and they're sacrificing what they're really doing in this process of trying to maintain their global position as top of the heap. They are, at least in Europe so far, they're sacrificing this is all coming at the expense of the living standards, at least of people in Europe, because Europeans are all most of the European countries are part of NATO, and therefore they're all aligned with America. Most of them are aligned with America, some more than others, but the big ones, yes, seem to be very much aligned, at least when it comes to Ukraine, and the talking points about how we need to stop Russia in Ukraine. Russia can't win in Ukraine because otherwise it'll be an absolute disaster. And we've talked to this before. We never got a clear answer from any of them. They all say that over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. We have to stop Russia in Ukraine, because if we don't stop Russia, then it will be disastrous. And if you push them, they'll say, well, you go like, what do you mean it'll be disastrous? What's wrong with letting Russia take Ukraine? What's that got to do with us anyway?
Yeah.
Why do we care? Why do you care so much? You act as though it's like it would be
the end of the world
for you, complete annihilation. That's the way you're talking. And as far as they'll go is to say that, well, which is a bullshit answer, because there's another answer behind this. But the bullshit answer is, well, if we don't stop him in Ukraine, well then he'll come into the Baltics. He absolutely intends on invading, and before you know it, he'll be
in London.
He'll be in Western Ireland. He'll be on one of those islands. I think that's maybe Iceland. Maybe he'll be in Iceland before.
The Aran Islands.
Yeah, and then
I'm taking these too.
And then from there it's like boom, a quick hop over the ocean, and he's like, it's a new.
He's in Manhattan.
Well, he's on Ellis Island. You know what I mean? Like the new. It's a new.
Hello, I bring papers.
Yeah. Him and the Russians are, and then it's invade all of America. Like, they literally talk as if that's the case, which is obviously utter bullshit. So what's the real reason? The real reason is that it would be. It's bigger than that. Obviously, it's their fear of
losing markets,
BRICS,
cheaper markets,
burgeoning multipolar world,
competition,
the rise of
economic
Russia.
competition,
Yeah.
competition we can't compete against because we've no.
It's the
manufacturing base like we used to.
Yeah. If we lose Eurasia, basically, if we lose particularly Western Europe, first protocol is keeping Western Europe, but all the rest as well, all the way across the Eurasian continent. Eurasia is the heartland. There's 80% of the world's population, 80% of the world's resources. America has to maintain control over that, and the rise of Russia over the past 20 years and the rise of China over the same period of time is threatening American dominance in the world, primarily on the Eurasian continent, where all those resources and all those population are. And if America loses its credibility, first and foremost, almost as the global power, the power that can and does stand up to anybody who tries to stand up to it, if it loses among public and other government perceptions that it can actually,
impose its will,
stare other countries down.
Yeah.
If that's seen to not be true anymore, then. So it is all about. It's very similar to when they talk about.
There is a domino effect they're afraid of.
Yes, it's quite abstract. It's more about sentiment. than anything else. But then
Faith in a dollar.
Yeah, that sentiment has like people often talk, have talked for years about markets and market sentiment and what the market thinks. And if the market thinks something about, they talk about the market as if it's a person. The market got up this morning and felt quite bad, was feeling shitty and a bit negative about the state of the world. So all the stocks collapsed, you know.
And you just lost $1 billion.
And you just lost $1 billion because the market wasn't feeling good, you know. So if there's a perception that America is no longer able to police the world, well then there's real world knock-on consequences that come from that in terms of that perception translating into actual change in policies and attitude by countries around the world towards America.
And no one is more exquisitely tuned to this than Lindsey Graham.
Yes.
Y'all don't understand. Yeah, it ain't democracy. It's the trillions minerals. But even that's not really. Ukraine doesn't have trillions of minerals, like they said about Afghanistan. It's the trillions of minerals. It's not even that. That is also a kind of a euphemism or shorthand for no. It's the trillions of minerals globally, and our dominant say in how they're distributed, and where the profits from it go. They go through Saudi Arabia into London and then back to New York, and we don't want that system changed.
But hey, they've got more tricks up their sleeve, you know. The West, they're nothing if not
Cunning,
creative and inventive. Here's article from today in light of recent events by Camilla Turner. She's a Sunday political editor. She says that Putin is ready to cripple Britain with cyber attacks. Well, and she's quoting the minister, so this is a government minister. Putin is prepared. Russia is prepared, not Putin. For once, it's not Putin. Russia is prepared. Not Putin himself, is prepared to launch a wave of cyber attacks on Britain that could turn out the lights for millions. A cabinet minister will warn at a NATO conference on Monday. Vladimir Putin, there he is. Vladimir Putin is willing and capable of triggering a destabilizing and debilitating electronic strike on the UK. Pat McFadden said, Russia is exceptionally aggressive and reckless in the cyber realm and wants to gain a strategic advantage and degrade the states that support Ukraine. National security threats.
Well, this is the pot calling the kettle black because, of course, cyber warfare is the Anglo system, their thing. Although some indeed, there may indeed have been Russian this and that here and there, but
a Russian cyber attack on British infrastructure and businesses that could shut down the power grids. Like that. That's what it'll sound like as well.
And lights out.
Forever. Damn you, Putin.
Yeah. So, well, there's a couple that... Obviously, this is fear-mongering, but this may be with one eye on global events beyond human ken, right? Because we thought about it before when they were telling people 2 years ago, take that Putin because you can't shower anymore because there's no more cheap gas from Nord Stream. We're rationing everything. I mean, it never really happened. But here in France, we're warning people, there's going to be a series of outages all through this winter. Maybe it was 2 winters ago. It never happened. But it was day after day. Sorry, guys, and Macron actually explicitly said the age of abundance is over. Time for everyone to tighten their belts. So maybe it's taking stock of the emergent multipolar reality, or it's with awareness of catastrophic disruptions to energy and supply chains, from...
Or just
weather,
corrupting,
disasters,
from weather, from mismanagement of the power grid, from blowing up Nord Stream 2, from forcing Europe to look elsewhere for gas and getting it from America and shipped in boats across the Atlantic, and maybe that not being such a good idea in the long term. Maybe some crisis hit in America where America no longer is able to provide that level of LNG to Europe, and Europe then has to go without, and that'll shut down the power grid pretty quick whenever you have no more gas to keep it running.
But like that, instantly, forever?
No.
It's more like, rolling shortages, like in the 70s.
Yeah.
The UK's had that before because of the oil crisis then.
Mm-hmm.
So more like a rolling energy crisis, probably what they're thinking of. But psychologically, but Britain is a basket case because there's ongoing internal issues, which Putin often refers to in the US and the West in general, where Putin/Russia is just such a convenient coverall for all kinds of internal problems, internal blackouts. I mean, is this intentional? I don't know. Here's a series of headlines from Britain this week about unrelated officially, right? Amidst farmers' protests, rare for Britain, common in France, rare in Britain. Suspicious drones over 3 U.S. air bases 3 days ago. Bomb threats called. Gatwick Airport, suspicious package forces evacuation of one of London's biggest airports. Same day, Friday, U.S. Embassy evacuated suspicious bomb package blown up by explosive team. The day before that, Chester City Centre shut down, bomb threat at multiple transport like bus stations and train stations. The day before that, schools in Farnborough, which is near a US airbase actually, schools in Farnborough placed on lockdown because of bomb threat called in. Mm-hmm. And now today, a stabbing on Westminster Bridge. Just maybe unrelated, maybe, but some of them are surely related. All those bomb threats, this is over like 3 or 4 days. Mm-hmm. You know,
yeah.
How do you? I'm not even going to tie that. I'm just tying that time-wise. You've got the British media, the British government telling the people through the media, this is existential. Tomorrow it could be like that. While right now it's so tenuous, the situation. Plus, there's probably some spooky stuff going on to cause these terror threats, and there's no linking of it. 15 years ago, it would have been obvious what they were getting at here. Oh, we've caught a patsy. It's Muslim. It would have made sense in the context of the war on terror. But now there's just random bomb threats that aren't even tied to Russia or Muslims or migrants or anything. They're just random bomb threats. Also, meanwhile, yeah, I don't know what credence you want to give this, but there's a UK Parliament website where you can register a petition. I think it's worth noting. This is the actual website, and I think it's the very petition. And they're calling for general elections. I know they just had one. Keir Starmer's barely 100 days in office. But because of so much political dissent at home with Starmer's government cracking down on free speech, it's at 1 million signatures. So check this out. Call for a general election. This was made yesterday. 1 million signatures in 24 hours. Right underneath that, Parliament will consider this for debate. Parliament considers all petitions that get more than 100,000 signatures for debate. So I think there has to be a government response to this petition. It'll probably just be no. But there it is. It's shooting up still. Over 1 million. Officially, 9 million people voted for the current government in July. In a, quote, landslide election. It wasn't. It was the lowest winning popular vote by a UK government since like 1820 something. Mm-hmm. You see what I mean? The situation is so tenuous. The risk of something big between NATO / the West and Russia has never been higher. It's super tense, right? Mm. And they're hammering people with, this could happen, the hammer could fall any moment, right? Mm. But look inside what's going on in these countries. And I mean, it's like, the state is teetering.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, yeah, exactly. But they blame all that in Russia.
Russia, yeah.
You know? I mean...
But people don't buy it.
Cyber war... it's in that article. If you put that article back up, the Telegraph one, Putin ready to cripple Britain with cyber attacks. He says,
Russia has targeted our media, our telecoms.
Yeah, where's that?
The second paragraph here.
Yeah. Russia is exceptionally aggressive and reckless and wants to gain strategic advantage and degrade the states, blah, blah. Where is that? Addressing the NATO there. Yeah, Russia has targeted our media, our telecoms, our political and democratic institutions, and our energy infrastructure. So all the bad things.
All the bad things that could happen.
Yeah.
We want you to know Putin did it. I don't think it's going to
Yeah.
work. This is trying to set people up psychologically. It's not going to work.
Like down below, it says earlier this year, 2 NHS hospital trusts in London were hacked,
I remember that.
causing the postponement of more than 800 planned operations and 700 outpatient appointments. The patients disrupted included those in need of cancer treatment and organ transplants. So it's like the fact that we've been underfunding the NHS for decades,
Yeah.
and it's teetering on the brink. It has got nothing to do with it. This was Russia. Russia hacked our hospitals and made it impossible for us to provide proper healthcare. If people don't believe it, then they're going to say it.
I think the tide has turned. I don't think even the normies believe it.
Do you think that the Trump effect will have any traction in Europe? Like, you know how trends seem to take a certain amount of time to reach from the U.S. Across the ocean. Do you think that after a year or two of Trump in the U.S. that there will be any noticeable change in the way people think in Europe or the governments? Or do you think it's just they're going to hold on as long as possible, to try to hold the Biden-Harris magic, across the pond? Or how's that going to work in Europe?
Well, I mean, the thing is, the whole populism thing that has been going on in Europe for quite a long time already.
Yeah.
Not contiguous, but contemporary with Trump. In the past 8 years or so, it's weird how it all happened around the same time. But Europe's a problem in the sense, if you took the whole European land, like let's say the EU, 28, whatever, 29 states, 28, 27, whatever, the European Union states, and made them all one voting bloc, and had one European populist right-wing party up against a European leftist party, the right-wing party would probably win. I mean, Europe isn't free from election rigging any more so than America is, and there's been quite a lot of that going on, particularly in relation to particular leaders who were, and not even right wing in a sense, but any leader who was clearly genuinely motivated to do
Something independent of Washington.
well, to cater to the will of the population, or to the interests of the population. Pretty simple stuff. You know what I mean? Jobs for here. Let's not get involved in America's or whoever's if warmongering around the world. Let's not. Let's bring industry back and jobs and business back to this country, and let's engage in all sorts of different policies that are in the interest of this country. Any leader in Europe that has come out with those kind of attitudes and that are not aligned with US kind of empire building have been in one way or another rigged out of the scene. That's true in several major European countries, and like someone that comes to mind before any of this even started was Jeremy Corbyn, who's is nowhere near very far from being a far right anything, but his policies are.
He was an
more,
economic nationalist.
Yes, he was an economic nationalist, and he was a populist. So, I mean, these terms or these definitions that they use break down whenever you actually look. You have to look at each individual and what they're actually interested in, and if they're good, honest, decent people, they generally all will have the same, more or less the same.
They will tend
policy or attitude.
They will
Towards
tend Trumpian.
Yeah.
And the powers that be know that. They've had some great headlines over the years where they've decided that Khan in Pakistan, AMLO in Mexico, Xi in China, nominally communist, right? And Orban, of course, and maybe, I think Corbyn was put on the list too. It was an Atlantic article. He said, and it was like, here come all the Trumps. People in totally different contexts with totally different ideological backgrounds. Some of them lefties. they're all Trump. We just see Trump emerging everywhere. So the Trump effect is real in the sense that it's happening everywhere contemporaneously. What would help big time is Trump can do a lot of things. That's part of the reason Europe fears him. Cut off funding to what is essentially CIA mockingbird media in Europe. Get control. This is a tall order. The State Department's like a government unto itself, but get control of the State Department. But the main thing would be voicing support for the Orbans of Europe, Marine Le Pen. Looking into exposing some of the shenanigans, we now know that the US State Department was very active in getting Emmanuel Macron as a candidate against Le Pen back in 2017. Just cutting that shit out, and then Europe would naturally. It's never going to. It's still so culturally and trade wise and politically aligned with the United States. It's never going to say, "Bye, we're off to Moscow." But their paranoia that's what'll happen is bringing about. It's wrecking the natural ties between Europe and the United States. It's an old story. This is the story of the Cold War, because no. This leader in Italy, he's coming in, he smacks of communism, so he can't be. He'll turn to Moscow, It's a lot of it hinges on NATO. I think NATO is like the vehicle of the deep state. The main thing that the glue that connects it all together.
Yeah,
I think so. Anyway, I mentioned it last week. There was a hint of it when a Dutch health minister was fielding questions in a congressional hearing in the Netherlands, and she was fending off charges about how they handle COVID, and said, "Well, look, we were under a lot of pressure. We had our obligations to NATO." And I was like, "What?" No one's ever said that before, because we always wondered. We all wondered, how on earth did the West do everything in lockstep at the same time? There must have been a bureaucratic vehicle through which it came. I think it's NATO. I think Trump knows that, and his whole dancing attack of making NATO partners pay their share, behind that is a realization that this is the problem. This vehicle. It's what's brought about the World War III threshold with Russia. Is keeping people he would like to see in office in Europe from coming into office. And all of this projected onto, oh no, these are all tactics of democratic manipulation by Russia. And Europe is just rife with it, and it comes through, I think, NATO.
Yeah.
MAGA. How's MAGA going? That's a question for you.
Yeah.
You're from Trumplandia.
Yeah, you're American.
Is it happening? You tell us, is the Trump effect happening?
No, I'm not American.
Huh?
Well, I'm North American.
Yeah.
But
you're MAGA though.
oh yeah.
Super MAGA.
But
Where's your red hat?
But the only MAGA I really see is on the internet, because I live in the middle of nowhere. So.
But that's where. But surely MAGA is in the middle of nowhere too.
Yeah. No, I mean I live in a red county, in an area of mostly contiguous red counties. So I mean,
you're bathed in MAGA, really.
Yeah, we're bathed in it.
And how's
we
it?
breathe it.
Yeah,
breathe it in the morning.
And do you wake up and do you feel the freedom and the MAGA? And
yeah. No, it's like I said, I see most of it online, because I don't.
You don't look out your window.
Get out much, no. But you can definitely feel the shift in the mood. And I was saying, like, in small things, I was saying that earlier today to someone that if you just take one example, it's looking on. You can find the videos on Twitter, on X, of athletes, just regular people at parties, foreigners like Chinese people, all doing the Trump dance, and I think that's indicative and even like symbolic of something much deeper. It's like for several years the majority of what I would argue is the majority of the American public, which supports Trump, like I'm just going to say I believe that's what's going on, have been like on the receiving end of just a ton of pressure and
Fear.
and hate and fear, and it's just, and it makes, even though they're strong and they've got opinions and convictions, it's still like this this constant pressure from all around to make you feel like you're, well, a bad person and part of a minority, like you're the pathological fringe.
Yeah.
But no, that's not actually the case. And Trump winning and winning with officially a decisive majority, which I think was probably bigger than acknowledged, than official, then that has given people the kind of the confirmation and the
confidence.
Yeah, and the confidence to kind of finally just be like
Do the dance.
to do the dance.
Yeah.
And it's fun. So people are now having fun again. Whereas before it was like, and I mean, there have been so many contributors to this, like Musk buying Twitter was one of them. It's like, okay, finally now we have a place where we can actually talk without getting banned. So it's been gradual, but Trump winning has kind of like opened the floodgates, I think, where people can finally feel like, okay, I'm okay. We're okay.
We're okay, and I'm free again.
Yeah.
What do you think the difference is between people who are just like never Trumpers and people who accept Trump? Because it seems to me to be something that must be quite psychologically quite deep, you know.
Yeah. I
It's
can't.
fundamental, essential to the nature of people. Because it's crazy. Because I don't see. I mean, I know a lot of people who are kind of never Trumpers and stuff,
Yeah.
and I mean, I have a theory about it or whatever. But at the same time, I don't understand, you know, on the face of it, why they're so anti-Trump. You know, why they have such a strong reaction to it, and why they believe so many things about what he's going to do, and how horrible it'll be, and he'll be a dictator and stuff, when there's no evidence for that. You know, It's all about the feels in a certain sense, whatever. You know, and they don't seem to want to actually look at it objectively and coldly and question whether or not their fears about Trump are actually justified or not. They just want to go with no, you know, and repeat nonsense. You know, and I mean, people in the media do it all the time. So in a certain sense, you can excuse people who get their information from the kind of leftist media because they repeat lies all the time about Trump and they smear. And it's happening right now with all of his cabinet picks like RFK and Tulsi Gabbard and all this kind of stuff. Even like Barry Weiss, Barry Weiss woman. Musk employed her as I don't know, DEI hire or something, or for Twitter.
For the Twitter files.
For the Twitter files.
He got her and what's his name?
Oh,
Schellenberger.
And did Greenwald do some too?
Yes, the three of those.
Right. But Barry Weiss she had some job within Twitter as well.
I don't remember that.
I don't
Didn't
think
she?
so.
Because she worked at like
She has her own media.
She worked at a big paper or media outlet,
Okay.
and then she quit, kind of like went independent and went on Substack, I think.
Okay. But she's like, so she was got on board with the Twitter files and exposing leftist collusion with Twitter owners' collusion with the CIA, FBI, and etc. to censor information, even true information on Twitter. But she recently was on Joe Rogan, and she came out against Tulsi Gabbard, and
that's old, but it was reposted recently. I think that's like a few years ago.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay, it's around the time the Twitter files actually that she was probably on there.
Or even before.
Well, what would she have been on there for?
Don't know. But she was saying en passant, oh yeah, everyone knows Tulsi Gabbard's a Russian agent, and Rogan had interviewed her a few times.
She said he was a.
She was an
Assad toady.
Toady.
So
Janie, look up toady, because Rogan was like, no, that's bullshit, but he gently got her to basically admit she had no idea what she was
she's
talking
just a
about.
journalist, So someone like that, you know, I mean, she just repeat that kind of stuff, because she absorbs the idea, all the propaganda and all that kind of stuff about Assad being a genocidal dictator, killing his own people, like Gaddafi and everybody else, and they absorb that information as if it is absolutely true. I mean, Barry Weiss is a journalist, so her brain is pickled anyway because she was brought up
in the school of journalism.
In journalism. So, but I mean, it's just it always perplexed me how people, apparently otherwise intelligent people, are unable to question information coming from any source. That's supposedly what you're meant to do as a journalist, question all the information. But when you're in this ideological bubble and it makes sense, and it's some kind of an appeal to, or some kind of a dependence on authority and your authority. You know what I mean? If you're absolutely dependent in a very essential way, in a deep kind of primal emotional way, that if you're dependent on believing that your authority is a good authority and would never lie, then you're fundamentally unable to ever see the world as it actually is, because you're by definition biased towards one side, and you can't not be biased, and it's personal to you. It's not like you're constantly saying, yeah, I'm gonna take this side because I know they're not really telling the truth, but I'm gonna make money out of them not telling the truth, or
no, they believe it.
It's
They believe
personal,
something
deeply
deep,
personal.
deep, yeah.
I think that it's the same thing. Like she has this knee-jerk reaction. Oh yeah, Tulsi Gabbard's an Assad toady, and blah blah blah. And she obviously never looked at any of the information around what Tulsi Gabbard said, whether she actually said anything like that. She met Assad for half an hour one time, and what she said about the alleged chemical weapon attacks and the counter argument against that, the evidence for that not being the case, that being basically a kind of false flag carried out by jihadis to try and blame Assad. And anybody who'd look at that and was half intelligent would not be able to turn around and just take one side or the other, if you know what I mean, in a black and white fashion.
Yeah.
But this is apparently a very intelligent person who's very successful. Wall Street Journal, New York Times, currently for Die Welt, the German broadsheet, started her own, founded her own media company and all this kind of stuff. And yet she doesn't know shit from Shanola. So what's the answer, Harrison? Why are there people like that? What does it mean for the idea of someone being intelligent? And how do you define intelligence now in the light of that kind of information?
That's a lot of questions.
Come on.
Oh man,
Spit it all out.
yeah, no,
Compound questions.
I'm with you. I can't understand it either. But I think that,
Authoritarian followers.
yeah, that's part of it. But there's also the because you see this in academics a lot, or smart people. And there was recently that tweet that was going around of the map of the U.S. if only people with degrees, like university degrees, would vote it, and it was like mostly blue, right?
Right.
And it's like, well, that might not mean what you think it means, but because there's a certain stupidity that comes with being smart, because I first thought about this and saw something written about it in the context of like postmodernism. So this would have been back in like 2016 or something when I was looking into that kind of stuff, and it was about academia and how, because when you go into university and you take some kind of like obscure course like that, like your job is, how can I make sense of this? And so you can be reading total nonsense, but you have to think your way through it and
Make it make sense.
Make it make sense to you, and that's how you adopt. Like that's how academics adopt a lot of crazy stuff, is because they learn it they have to think like that in order to pass their course.
Right.
So they learn
They internalize it.
They
Yeah.
internalize it, exactly. And so I think that for a lot of quote unquote smart people, they find a way of making it make sense. And they internalize it.
That's what they use their intelligence to do.
Right.
That. They're smart enough to do that.
They're smart enough to do that, but not smart enough to just step outside of it and say, well, maybe it's all just bullshit.
Right.
Like, because in university, how many kids that go into university and start learning postmodernism actually go that direction? It's like probably not very many. Like they don't. Maybe they need to teach that in university. Okay, here are the ideas. Now, what I want you to do is totally disregard them. No, because your professors usually has a certain school of thought that he or she is a part of, and it's like, no, you can't criticize that these are actually true, and especially if you're getting into postmodernism. So I think it's a kind of a similar dynamic in the news.
Yeah, I suppose it would take a pretty straightforward intelligence, significant intelligence, to take a pile of shit and actually effectively use it as shinola to shine your shoes, and make it work, and then convince yourself that that's worked, and then convince a lot of other people that it's actually worked.
Right.
So only an intelligent person could go through all the sorts of mental gymnastics that were necessary to do that, to transfer shit into Shinola. Whereas a stupid person would just go, that's shit, and that's Shinola.
And that's the origin.
Smell it.
Yeah.
That's the origin of the midwit meme.
Right.
Right? Where you have the midwit and the genius that are agreeing, and it's the people in the middle of the bell curve, and the more intelligent part of the bell curve that are disagreeing. Right? Yeah. Because the dumb person just is like, no, that's dumb. I don't understand it. I don't need to understand it.
I don't know why, but it is.
Yeah, I don't know why, but it's dumb. And then the genius is like, well, here are the reasons why you're right. And then everyone in the middle.
I did a PhD in it.
Yeah.
I see. So you're invested in it being Shinola, but it's shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I remember 20 years ago, I was in the humanities, and I would just plod through and just get the essay or the work done and not believe it.
Yeah.
I got what I needed to pass. I didn't believe it. I mean, 9/11 had just happened and no one would talk about it. I was like, hello, elephant in the room, people, and Zionism, and what about this U.S. empire? No. This is how the American system works. Okay, so I regurgitate back. This is how the American system works. That's not how it works. But okay, they give me the A+ marks for that.
There's one more thing, and this was something that Tucker Carlson talked about in an interview, probably in the last year sometime. And he was talking about just being part of a milieu, right? Where there are certain things that you just don't think or don't talk about. And I can't remember what the particular issue was. I don't know if it was 9/11, but it was something like 9/11. Might have been the Iraq War. I can't remember. I don't think it was that. But basically, like in the Washington circles, that he was a part of, it's like a counter narrative was just something that you didn't even consider. And I think that comes down to social dynamics. So when you're part of a group that just has a particular view for whatever reason, I think that's a big part of it too. Is that it's just totally off limits. And so even for Tucker, he was basically saying, no, I couldn't even consider that. It wasn't until, years later, kind of like breaking the ties of that kind of social environment that you can even consider an idea as possible. So I think that there's an element of the intelligence that we're talking about and just the social part of it. It's like you go to a big city. You see this in videos like in New York. I think it might have been I don't think it was Ryan Long who does videos, like comedy videos on the streets of New York. I think it was someone else, but he was just walking down the streets of New York in a MAGA hat, right? And with a hidden camera, someone else watching, and you look at the reactions, and people are like,
disgust as he walked by.
It's like, why?
And that was after he won, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because it can't be that strange, right? Or it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of people in New York voting for Trump, right? But it's become.
Speaking of cities,
the social thing.
I think there's a clue in the. You've seen that more detailed U.S. election results map, the official results. It's a sea of red and dots of blue. I think the clue is in, and there are some bigger pockets of blue, but they tend to be conurbations of large cities, metropolises. I think it's not that simple, rural versus cities. But in a city, you are more likely to get a social multiple stacked social circles that are going to reinforce each other. So New Yorkers are getting the same media, they're getting the same impressions, hearing the same things day in, day out.
All their friends.
A MAGA hat comes in and it really is, this is alien, that's from outside.
Yeah.
A country within the country.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's complicated, obviously. It's human psychology. You need it's fairly prosaic in the basics of it, right? You can come up with an explanation as to why that happens, but it starts to get very interesting when you look more deeply into it. And there's all sorts of different aspects of it, like the differences between people, like Jonathan Haidt's book on
moral taste buds,
the difference between left and right Republicans, Republicans and Democrats, or left and right, and that those two sides of the political factions are based on inherent aspects of individuals' natures that they're born with, and there's no real changing them. So
Are
yeah.
they immutable though? Because you wonder if in fact in the last election it was more like a 4-1 split and not a 55-45. You know what I mean? You can actually have Democrats who see the light. And there have been plenty of anecdotal videos of confessions. I'm a former Democrat, never Trumper. Oh my God, I woke up. You know?
Yeah. I think it's somewhat mutable. I think it's probably, just like everything, like a bell curve. Like you've got some it's just totally ingrained, but then there's a certain portion where.
Now, having said that, and maybe this is part of the immutability is that Trump went lefty as well. He said MAGA is going to be a unity movement. RFK Jr., Elon Musk, Tulsi Gabbard, Nicole Shanahan. So you've got a merger there of Liberal Care Foundation and the Sacred and the Nation.
It's just that now that people with the liberal mindset have a reason for supporting Trump. It's like they might not agree with everything, but there's enough overlap that they can get away with it without even having to change their basic value structure.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's
which remains unchanged.
Yeah, that's one of the. It comes down to competing taste buds then for particularly for lefties. It's for the same for everybody, but it comes down to conflicting taste buds and which ones hold them. Which one dominates in any given situation? You know, like the question of migrants is an interesting one because you've got. The Care Foundation obviously applies for lefties in terms of migrants. You know, these are poor people coming from. They're told these are poor people coming from a country
Kids in
and
cages.
they're suffering, all this kind of stuff. Totally activates your Care Foundation, but then at the same time, depending on how this left-leaning person would perceive that, if it's in their city and they see other effects of that kind of migration, mass migration into their city, then suddenly it's their kind of in-group.
Yeah.
Kind of taste bud or whatever can be activated, and that's like, well, it's now kind of in conflict. Like I want to help these people, but
they're taking over hotels downtown.
Right, they're actually destroying the community, and there's even confliction towards if there's negative effects on the people in your community. Then what about your Care Foundation?
Yeah,
how does that relate to the people in your community compared to the people with these immigrants? You know, which one gets your Care Foundation? You know, and then there's also I think left-leaning people have a lot of. Was it them have discussed? No, I think that was conservatives have a higher disgust, right?
Yeah,
that ties in with the sacredness. But there's a few others that you can look at it, and you look at any given situation. You say, well, it's not very clear which one of your taste buds would actually hold sway in this given situation, and it depends how it plays out. You know, so it may be that a lot of otherwise left-leaning Democrat type people voted for Trump because of what they saw, what they've seen. I have been seeing around immigration, particularly in certain cities.
And they saw the consequences last. They had to see it and feel it and taste it. Whereas the first Republican Trumpers back in 2016, who, ironically, have been lambasted these last 8 years for being retards, saw furthest. So, and there's a scale. Someone did it with the more PhD, the more degrees you have, the less likely you were to be pro-Trump. So officially, the less educated people got Trump earliest, and now it's spreading slowly. Did you see that? Well, we saw this already, but what does this mean for MAGA? Gates' nomination is folded. Boo, hiss. That would have been fun. Gates as Attorney General. I was looking forward to that.
Yeah. That's when you're not squeaky clean or protected, then you're going to pay for it.
Yeah. We saw a wild thread about it. I'm not going to try to summarize it here, but it's not that... Did Matt Gaetz do anything wrong?
Yeah,
or he knew someone who did. Probably.
Well,
he probably did.
It sounded like in the thread. It sounds like he probably did sleep with a 17-year-old.
Yeah,
but she had a legal ID.
Yeah.
Not even like it was fake, only.
By Greenberg.
Right, a fake produced by the machines that produce real IDs that said she was of age.
Yeah.
So technically he slept with a 17-year-old while having every reason to believe that she was 18, but still it's like...
Yeah, but even if you believe she was 18, he was, what, 30?
Yeah. it looks bad.
5 at the time.
It looks
maybe?
bad regardless of whatever the circumstances were.
I mean, technically, there's nothing technically bad about that, except if you're there's for some reason in America or even Western democracies, it still is a thing amongst the population that politicians are meant to be, hold to a standard and a kind of morality that is much above that of the average person. The average person can allow themselves certain things, but politicians, and you can still use that against them. So even though
Hunter Biden,
I know, no, but apparently people. What I mean is still perceived that people, but you don't. You can imagine, but you can imagine
Agreed.
that. No, but you can imagine that a lot of people in America didn't. Obviously, they weren't supportive of Hunter Biden, right? I mean, so
or his dad's,
or even his
Peter
father.
Pete.
Exactly, yeah. So
No, but officially
what I
he
mean
isn't.
is, people still have that
Yeah.
as an ideal for
Yeah.
the politicians. They still want to see that in the
Impeccable.
politicians.
They have to be impeccable.
even if they don't get it. So it can still be used against politicians. So even though Matt Gaetz at 35 or whatever age he was, sleeping with or having a girlfriend or sleeping with or even paying for sex with an 18-year-old, what he thought was an 18-year-old, can still be held up as, well, that's a bit, it's, in the domain of ill repute, let's say. So he shouldn't hold any high office.
It's a shame, all the same. But okay, so the non-Israel loving MAGA wing is moaning about this as this is another development in an Israel firster cabinet for Trump, right? And yet, this is the Atlantic putting this out yesterday. They're agitating the Never Trump Beltway about his cabinet being the most anti-Semitic in decades. I mean, you can't win, Which is it? Is it Israel first or anti-Semitic?
Everything I don't like is anti-Semitic.
Yeah,
so when did this come out? Was this before or after Gates?
Hopefully we can see it. Well, not behind the paywall, is it?
The date on it, 21st.
21st?
A few days ago.
And
Oh, it came out before because it does mention Gates
Okay.
for the first 3
but
paragraphs.
isn't Gates like the only one that doesn't?
not paid by
Yeah.
AIPAC? Yes, it is.
So I guess it's objectively true. That might be the
Yeah.
most anti-Semitic
Because
cabinet.
it had one person. Yeah, one person was.
It rags on about Gates mostly. You're right.
If there's even
And-
one person in
Yeah.
an administration who's anti-Semitic, then that's the most anti-Semitic ever.
Is that true that Gates was the only? Well, there's Thomas Massey, I know. Is
Yeah, but
also-
has Massey even been?
He's not in.
He hasn't been named for anything yet.
No.
Okay.
But yeah, Gates is the one.
And AOC recently was complaining about AIPAC.
Oh,
We
yeah?
need to get AIPAC out of Congress or something like that.
Yeah, they do that now and again.
But
But they have no chance of doing it. Did you see, so anyway, talking about anti-Semitism, you see, obviously, Bibi and his former defense minister got
arrest
warrants.
formally issued by the International Criminal Court.
Yes.
That's the third thing against them. They've now had a UN resolution. I know most of them fail because the US says no, but there was one where the veto didn't matter and there was a formal UN resolution saying Israel is committing genocide or I can't remember. Well, anyway, it was a breakthrough. It was technically a first for Palestine. I think it was Palestinian statehood recognition. Anyway,
Yeah.
then the ICJ on the genocide case. That was earlier in the year. And now this. That's... I know it's still happening. It doesn't mean anything. These people have no teeth, but yet there is some meaning to it. This has never happened in its existence since 1948. Formal legal condemnation
Yep.
in international criminal law from 3 bodies in the space of a year.
And
So
guess-
that's something.
And guess what Netanyahu said in response to it?
Oh, it's anti-Semitic. The ICC is Hamas.
I mean, talk about being unimaginative. Like, is that really all you have? Every single time, everything that I don't like or anything that's said about me or anything that happens is anti-Semitic. This is more evidence of anti-Semitism. It's like, Bibi's standing there, like, stabbing some Palestinian, and someone says, "Stop that, Bibi. Don't be anti-Semitic now. I'm just stabbing a person." To say that it's wrong is anti-Semitic, apparently. And you see, Tom Cotton.
Yeah.
You talk about people.
He's senator, yeah.
Yeah.
Senator Tom
Yeah.
Cotton. He threatened to invade the Netherlands.
Yes. He said
So much murder.
He said the ICC, International criminal court is a kangaroo court, which he was totally happy to have issue or not arrest warrant, I think, or
For Putin.
For Putin, but now that it's for Bibi, it's the ICC is a kangaroo court, and Karim Khan, who's the guy who pushed that case,
Yes.
woe to him and anyone who tries to enforce these outlaw warrants. Let me give them all a friendly reminder. The American law on the ICC is known as the Hague Invasion Act for a reason. Think about it.
What's
And
the community note?
Community
on
note
that?
is awesome. Click on the community note.
Why can't we see it? Usually it's displayed.
No,
It's a proposed one. Maybe it doesn't have enough votes
Hasn't been
yet.
approved yet.
Yeah.
Has to be approved by Hasbro. Tom Cotton has received $237,000 from the Pro Israel. That's perfect. Just perfect.
End of.
Good job. Of course, he's not the only nutsoid American Christian Zionist. There's our old friend, the gentleman from Southern Carolina, Lindsey Graham. He went a little further than don't forget the Hague Invasion Act.
Canada, Britain, Germany, France. If you try to help the ICC, we're going to sanction you.
Well, that means I want every ally. You saw a little
Okay, I
just
take that
in
back. Sanctions aren't as
Canada
bad
and
as
his
invading.
position. What should the penalty be?
We should crush your economy because we're next. Why can't
We're going
Oh, I
to
wish I
crush
had
your
more of that.
economy. We're going to crush you if
Maybe
you
we should get more of that.
say anything about Israel. We're going to crush you.
And it's not working because, as far as I know,
Sad.
all of Europe has. No, that's not true. Orban said he would not respect that.
Orban's a crypto.
Orban, oh, it's such a. He recently said something. He goes from awesome to villain in the space of 24 hours. He said something. He said for the first time, I've never heard anyone other than Lavrov say this. The era of 500 years of Western domination is coming to an end. He was talking about the reality of what Putin's been saying, that whatever happens in Ukraine and how it happens, there's a huge sea change happening, multipolarity, the shift from west to east. And he was just noting that reality. The 500-year thing was cool because it really is like the way to bring it home to people, that it's happening and it's unstoppable.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes and says, he writes a letter. Dear Bibi, when you get a moment from stabbing Palestinian babies, feel free to drop in. We'd love to see it. Like, that's really like, there's no need for that. It's one thing to cleverly not get hit by the Israel network by playing ball, but to put yourself on the line, morally, legally, politically, that's disgusting. Meanwhile, the IDF is dropping bombs all over Beirut.
Mm-hmm.
That toll, as of now, since it's been 2 months, is 3,600 people.
It's so anti-Semitic for you to say that, Neil.
I don't care. Fuck them.
5 anti-Semitism out of 5.
Screw you, Israel.
The fact that we have to deal with that kind of bullshit, like the whole world has to listen to those people as they slaughter people left, right, and centre, saying we're defending ourselves, and you're a bad person if you say anything. You want to kill us. If you want us to stop killing those people, that means you want to kill us. Okay, if that's your argument, okay, it's fucking batshit crazy, but okay, like to literally everybody in the world with a half functioning brain. But okay, keep saying it.
There's a psychological analysis.
Right there. Yeah.
Right there.
Analyze
What's the difference between MAGA and MEGA? What makes one or the other?
MEGA.
MEGA is Make Israel Great Again, but under the guise of Make America Great Again. But actually, you're
MEGA.
yeah.
Never heard of MEGA. What are you
Okay,
asking,
the difference between MAGA for real and Israel First MAGA. Like, it's religion, of course. It's Epstein bribery, of course. It's money, of course. But I mean, it's something more profound and fundamental than that as well, right?
It's more than geopolitics, I think. Yeah, more than just we need Israel to control the Middle East, to control the petrodollar, to control the world, to keep the American hegemony going. It seems to be more than that, yeah. But it goes back.
Because Orban's just acknowledged that the American system, Pax Americana, is coming to an end.
Yeah.
So when he then says Israel's awesome, baby's fine, he can come here. He's not thinking of Israel. We need Israel as a petrodollar base. or a raison d'etre for being in the Middle East.
It's personal religious, pseudo-religious ideology. I mean, it goes back a long time. The Christian Zionism, goes back into the 1800s, in the UK and all that kind of stuff. And it's hard to tease out whether at that time those people in the British establishment who were very supportive of Israel and the Zionists and the Balfour Declaration and all that kind of stuff. His Majesty looks with favour upon your, the creation of a Israeli homeland in Palestine stuff. That's over 100 years old. They were all fully behind it. I mean, obviously at that time there were geopolitical reasons why they were behind it as well, but at the same time they were laying on there were individuals who were clearly supporting the creation of the State of Israel and supporting Israel and supporting Zionism.
For Scripture.
For biblical.
For the prophecy. For the great work.
For religious reasons. And those people are just, I don't know, Harrison can write a Substack on that.
That's another tricky one. It's as tricky as like when we were talking about the hardcore leftists, right? The never Trumpers. Because it's like, what's the psychological reason for, let's say, Jordan Peterson, right? Why is he so pro-Israel? It's like he's not thinking about geopolitics or anything like that.
No.
It's like
he's a good example of the biblical.
Yeah, but even then, it's like
support.
Because he's not a fundamentalist.
No.
But
he finds so much meaning and value in the biblical texts.
Yeah.
And then he
has to believe it's all sacred
he's
and valuable.
looking at that in the context of Judeo-Christianity and the official story of Judeo-Christianity and how, the Old Testament is, the original Bible. And despite the fact that the New Testament is meant to be overwrite the Old Testament.
You don't have to not be a Christian to be anti-Semitic. It's like...
Yeah.
It's like... There's plenty of Christian anti-Semites out there.
Right.
So
exactly. But that's a split within Christianity as well,
Judeo-Protestant shite.
Catholics would tend to be a lot more anti-Israel than Protestants.
Anti-Israel, or there have been some extremists for sure over the years. But it's not so much it's more likely that majority Catholic Europe will look at the situation in Israel and go, oh, well, I can see right there, they're genociding them and their rationale for why they're doing it. I was on board at the beginning because, Hamas terrorism, but no, you've gone too far. It's just a simple judgment call.
But
Spain is like, that's it, we're done.
That's the difference between Jesus and Yahweh. Yahweh is the smiter God who encourages everybody to smite people, encourages his people in particular, to his Israeli people to smite their enemies and smite Yahweh's enemies and do a lot of smiting, whereas Jesus came along and said, love your neighbour and turn the other cheek and stuff. And it's like, well... Are you really? The apple fell very far from that tree. I mean, usually the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, but it's hard to see Jesus as Yahweh's son. When you look at the actual details. Yahweh was. You'd think Jesus would be estranged from his father. He was pretty abusive. Up in heaven when they were growing up, he must have been a real fucking tyrant. And I don't think Jesus would have really spoken to him in later life. And that's maybe why Jesus came up with the New Testament and said, you see all the stuff my dad stands for? I'm fucking totally against that. It's all bullshit.
Rebellion against his father.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But then the Protestant Reformation came along.
And said, no, bring back Yahweh. We like smiting, especially under the British Empire.
You see Musk trolling the libs.
Every day.
Well, the latest one is he's going to buy MSNBC.
Oh, yeah.
Put this up.
Very, very unpresidential. MSNBC, yeah. Apparently, I don't think he can buy MSNBC. It's not being sold off. It's being kind of compartmentalized into some other. They're restructuring it financially. It's not actually being put up for sale. But yeah, it's a nice idea.
Well, what's the community note on this one? The proposed note. Okay, that was obvious.
Yeah, in case you didn't know, they're
Good
not
job.
actually sitting in
We
the
need more
studio.
autistic people doing community notes. That's awesome.
It's like did you see using the same format, did you see the painting of the Dutch painting?
Yeah.
Dies Nutzen or
Dietz Nutzen.
Dietz Nutzen.
And some people fell for it.
Yeah. Including some big media outlets, right? That was hilarious. And they fact checked it, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Very funny.
What would we do without the fact checkers? We'd just be lost, wouldn't we?
Yeah, we'd be adrift in a sea of misinformation, malinformation, and disinformation. We wouldn't know what to
Yeah.
do. Time's getting on, but wild weather of late. Any? What about this bomb cyclone thing? Is that what they call it again?
Bombogenesis.
Bombogenesis off the Pacific.
I was Putin weaponizing the weather.
Jesus Christ! But one of these days they're going to start doing that. I mean, they are implying it between the lines that anything that goes wrong is his fault. Here's a radar of it. It's nuts. I think it's ongoing because it's created that atmospheric river of rain that's streaming over Southern California. I think you might see some of it in this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sits there while pulling in all the way. San Francisco airport's flooded, I believe, today. Certainly flooding in the city. Mad snow in Turkey, but then that has happened there
Start of
before.
an ice age.
What?
Start of an ice age.
This winter?
No, this is what you're seeing there. That and many other aspects of the changing weather is precursors to a new ice age.
Yeah.
So global warming does actually cause an ice age.
They don't tell anyone that.
I know.
They've got everyone thinking, yeah,
They don't know that, I don't
we'll all be
think.
living on inland a bit because the sea level's going to rise. But
Yeah.
otherwise, you know,
They'll figure it out. Like,
these wild temperature swings are part of it. This is
figure it out too
insane.
late.
Western Ireland had snow, then heavy rain and flood. And now it's going to have nighttime temperatures that are higher than its July daytime
mm-hmm.
peaks.
In December, yeah.
It's mad.
It's all crazy.
It's you know, there was another COP climate change event.
That didn't go down well.
It
apparently.
came. I got a little bit of it here and there in the news, but it just was such a damp squib. I don't even think I heard stories of anecdotal journalists who were there saying that leaders were flying in and going, "Well, I'm out of here," and leaving. They just lost interest. Even leaders have lost interest in that shit.
It's too late. They all know it's too late to do anything about it. Of course, they'll say it's too late. We should have done more, and it's too late now, and we're all going to fry, and then there'll be an ice age. Eventually, you know, probably the hardcore ones will never admit it. You know, that it's actually a natural cycle, and that it has all sorts of, you know, it's cosmic. It's, you know, it's cosmic in nature, and
Putin did once.
he said it once.
Yeah, I'm going to try and find it. I've seen it on 2 occasions, but it's been many years. He was trying to get someone to calm down. You know, it's just, Russia's commitments to Kyoto. Yeah. Look, we're not even sure, our experts, how much of it's man-made, and you start talking about natural cycles, and it's fine. Don't panic, you know.
Tom Chambers saying all last week was around 0 degrees in the UK, and it was 13 degrees today. Yeah, those strange swings, you know, are they just cause, you know, unusual weather patterns that are usually quite destructive, you know. But like we said in the past, it's about basically monsoon. If anybody knows what a monsoon is, and the monsoon regions of the planet where you get these massive downpours, very short period of time, usually, or during particular seasons. There's monsoon seasons where there's a lot of rain and then it gets dry. That's, you know, they're typified by sharp delineations of a lot of rainfall, then dry period, then a lot of rainfall, then dry period. Well, that's kind of moving north, let's say, caused by global warming, actually, but not man-made. That's the short answer. And in the wintertime, a lot more rainfall means, in more northern latitudes, means a lot more snowfall. Anyway, are you done?
I'm done.
Do you want to hear the funniest joke in the world?
Yeah.
Officially.
There we go.
It's a bit longer than my usual ones.
Right.
2 hunters are out in the woods when one of them collapses because he got an mRNA vaccine. No, he doesn't seem to be breathing, and his eyes are glazed. So the other guy whips out his phone and calls the emergency services. So he gasps down the phone, "My friend is dead. What can I do?" The operator says, "Calm down. I can help. First, let's make sure he's actually dead." So there's a silence, and then there's a gunshot. And the guy comes back and the phone says, "Okay, now what?" True story.
Is
yeah.
it? You read that on
It's
the
a true
National
story. It
Enquirer?
actually happened. Yeah. Anyway.
That's misleading on his part because if he tells the operator, my friend's dead,
mm,
okay, well, make sure he's dead. He shoots him.
yeah, well, that's fair enough, right? Logical, no? Just did the operator told me, did you? Anyway, yeah. So, thanks for joining us today, Harrison. Thanks, guys, for listening, watching,
guys.
commenting. We'll be back next week, maybe.
Not likely.
You never know, but we might be. If not, sometime soon thereafter.
Harrison
So-
and Joe will be back next week.
Yeah, exactly.
I got
exactly. Yeah.
places to be.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. So until then, have a good week and
Thanks for watching.
stay warm.
Bye.
See ya.
Can't stop the signal now.